I thought my family would break me that Christmas Eve. Instead, they handed me the keys to my freedom. That night, under the twinkling lights and manufactured cheer of our annual holiday party, the carefully constructed facade of my life crumbled, but it wasn't me who fell apart. I grew up believing love was something you earned, through perfect behavior, flawless grades, and silent obedience. My older sister, Olivia, lived in a completely different household, one where affection flowed freely, and expectations bent like warm taffy whenever she batted her eyelashes. This double standard hit me around age 7. I brought home straight A's, 1 A- in gym. My mother, Sarah Reed, barely looked up, then asked why I hadn't tried harder. 2 weeks later, Olivia's report card was a mix of B's and C's. My parents, Sarah and David Reed, took her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework, listening to the garage door close, understanding my place in our family hierarchy. My parents ran a successful accounting firm in suburban Colorado. They were obsessed with appearances, Christmas cards with matching sweaters, forced smiles, and the narrative of 2 accomplished daughters destined for greatness. The reality behind closed doors was a stark contrast. My father, David, built his identity on professional success and social standing. He served on the country club board, donated conspicuously, and worked with a relentless energy, always calculating the transactional value of every relationship. My mother, Sarah, was his perfect complement, hosting lavish dinner parties, volunteering at the right charities, and cultivating friendships that benefited David's business. Together, they built a picture of family perfection that demanded constant maintenance and absolute cooperation from us. Olivia instinctively understood how to play the game. She charmed David's clients, complimented Sarah's hostessing, and presented exactly the image of accomplished young womanhood they wanted. Her private actions mattered far less than her public performance. I learned that lesson watching her escape consequences that would have crushed me. Olivia, 3 years my senior, had an effortless charm. Teachers forgave late assignments, boys stumbled over themselves. She breezed through high school with a string of boyfriends, mediocre grades that never raised concern, and an uncanny ability to deflect blame. I watched from the sidelines, observing how favoritism operated as openly as our central heating. The unfairness was crushing at times. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Why were Olivia's failures charming quirks, while my minor imperfections were character flaws? At 14, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped expecting fairness and started recognizing patterns. Once I understood the predictable, unjust rules of our family dynamics, I could navigate them more effectively. Emotion gave way to strategy, and hurt transformed into careful observation. My bedroom became my sanctuary. I covered its walls with maps of places I dreamed of, filled shelves with books about people who overcame impossible odds, and spent hours researching universities far enough from Colorado that casual parental drop-ins would be impractical. Every essay, every extracurricular, every test aced was another brick in the wall between my current circumstances and my future freedom. By junior year, I'd built an identity as Olivia's opposite. Where she was social, I was studious. Reckless, I was calculated. My room displayed academic decathlon trophies, hers, party Polaroids and concert tickets. My parents saw Olivia as vibrant. They saw me as dependable, which often meant invisible. The summer before senior year, I stumbled upon something that would become my insurance policy. Olivia had been dating Mason, the son of David's biggest client. Mason drove a luxury car, wore watches worth a fortune, and treated Olivia like a decorative accessory. Their relationship was the pride of my parents' social ambitions. They practically glowed when Mason visited. David would pour expensive scotch and talk investments, Sarah would fuss over appetizers like royalty had arrived. The idea of Olivia marrying into the Miller family represented everything they'd worked for, a permanent elevation of the Reed name. They were so blinded by potential benefits, they never questioned if Olivia's affection for Mason was genuine or strategic. I saw inconsistencies from the start. Olivia complained constantly about Mason when our parents weren't around, his conversation, his fashion, his insufferable habit of talking about sailing. She rolled her eyes at his texts and often cancelled plans with him to see other men, whose existence she kept hidden. The gap between her public performance and private contempt was jarring, even for me, someone used to her duplicity. What my parents didn't know was that Olivia had been systematically manipulating Mason for money. She convinced him to fund a supposed investment opportunity that was actually her personal shopping account. Through sweet talk and strategic tears, she'd extracted nearly $40,000 in 8 months. I found the evidence borrowing her laptop one day when mine crashed. Bank statements, text conversations, a detailed spreadsheet tracking her extractions like some twisted game. That spreadsheet horrified me. She had columns detailing each withdrawal with notes about the emotional manipulation techniques used. One entry told him my car needed repairs. Cried about feeling like a burden. Got $3,500. Another, investment opportunity pitch. Used business terminology Dad taught me, $8,000 transfer confirmed. She was treating fraud like a project management exercise, complete with running totals and projected future extractions. I sat there for an hour, scrolling through months of calculated deception. Mason wasn't sympathetic, given his entitled attitude, but no one deserved this. The scale of Olivia's manipulation revealed a depth of dishonesty that even I, cynical as I was, hadn't expected. My first instinct was to tell my parents, to finally show them Olivia's true character. That impulse lasted about 30 seconds before reality hit. 18 years of data told me they would never accept negative information about their golden child. They'd minimize it, excuse it, or blame me for finding it. The evidence would be dismissed, and I'd be punished for snooping. So, I screenshotted everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder. Call it paranoia, call it preparation, something told me those files would matter someday. Gathering evidence became almost meditative over the next months. If Olivia left her phone unlocked, I grabbed screenshots of conversations with men whose names I didn't recognize. She bragged to friends during calls she thought were private, unaware I was in the next room, door cracked. Each new piece went into my digital archive, organized by date and misconduct. I told myself I was being prudent. The reality was more complicated. Part of me wanted validation, proof my perceptions weren't paranoid. Delusions. Another part wanted insurance against future manipulations targeting me. And, yes, a small, vindictive corner of my soul simply wanted ammunition. Senior year unfolded with predictable college applications and family dinners. My accomplishments got brief nods. Olivia's latest drama commanded the spotlight. She'd graduated, supposedly attending community college, though her schedule seemed to consist of brunch and shopping, all funded by Mason. My college counselor, Ms. Jenkins, became an unexpected ally. She saw something in me, perhaps the exhaustion of constantly performing adequacy in a household that demanded perfection from me while rewarding mediocrity in Olivia. She encouraged me to aim high. Acceptance letters arrived like permission slips for a life I'd barely dared to imagine. NYU's thick envelope felt heavy, weighted with possibility and the promise of distance. I opened it alone in my bedroom, reading the words 3 times before believing they were real. For the first time in 18 years, something I wanted had materialized through my own effort, not parental approval or sibling manipulation. I applied to 12 universities, got into 10. NYU was my top choice, a prestigious program that promised physical distance from the Reed household dynamics. My parents agreed to fund my education with the same lukewarm enthusiasm they applied to everything involving me. It was an investment in family reputation, not parental pride. The tuition conversation still replays with crystalline clarity. David sat behind his desk, reviewing NYU's financial aid package, calculating their contribution. He approached my education like a business acquisition, evaluating ROI, never showing emotional investment. Sarah suggested a state school, something closer where they could keep an eye on me. The implication, that I needed supervision while Olivia had been trusted at the same age, wasn't lost on me. I gently pushed back, citing NYU's program rankings, framing my ambitions in the language of reputation enhancement my parents understood. Eventually, they agreed, but David made it clear that continued funding depended on maintained academic performance and appropriate behavior. My freshman fall at NYU was transformative. For the first time, I existed outside Olivia's shadow. Professors knew my name for my contributions, not as Olivia's little sister. I made friends who appreciated my dry humor and fierce loyalty. I kept a near-perfect GPA while working part-time at the campus library. Those months tasted like freedom, like the person I was always meant to be finally had room to breathe. My roommate, Chloe, whose family had recently moved from California to the NYC area, became my first real friend outside the social ecosystem my parents had cultivated. Her family actually enjoyed spending time together, siblings supported each other, parents expressed pride without conditions. Hearing her stories about holiday traditions felt like anthropological research into an alien culture. She listened to my carefully edited stories about home with growing concern, eventually telling me my family dynamics sounded deeply unhealthy. Nobody had ever named it so directly before. The library job gave me more than pocket money. It gave me structure, competence outside academics, and access to a community of student workers who became a second family. My supervisor, a graduate student named Leo, taught me financial independence in ways my accounting executive father never had. He explained credit building, emergency funds, the importance of maintaining resources nobody else could control. Those lessons would prove invaluable sooner than I expected. Thanksgiving break shattered the illusion that distance could protect me. I returned home to find Olivia engaged to Mason. Sarah was already planning an elaborate summer wedding. The house buzzed with excitement, pushing me to the periphery of every conversation. The engagement ring was obscene, a diamond so large it looked theatrical. Olivia displayed it constantly, angling her hand to catch the light during meals, resting it conspicuously. Mason beamed with proprietary satisfaction. The whole performance made my stomach turn, knowing what I knew. Wedding planning consumed Sarah. Venue scouting, catering, dress shopping dominated every discussion. David discussed the guest list as networking opportunities, calculating which clients deserved invitations to what he clearly saw as a professional showcase. Nobody asked about my semester, my classes, my friends, my adjustment to college. I sat through 3 days of wedding talk, observing the machinery of family dysfunction operating at peak efficiency. The contrast with my NYU life was disorienting, like traveling between parallel dimensions. During holiday dinner, Olivia announced she wanted me as her maid of honor. The request came wrapped in performative sisterly affection, complete with tears and declarations of our bond. My parents beamed. I agreed, because refusing would have caused a scene that would follow me back to campus in disappointed phone calls and guilt-laden care packages. The real purpose of the maid of honor invitation revealed itself over the next weeks. Olivia called constantly, assigning tasks that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with maintaining her deceptions. She wanted me to cover for her when she missed bridal appointments to meet other men. She expected me to manage the narrative around her finances when Mason's family questioned the investment returns she'd promised. The calls came at all hours, interrupting study sessions and library shifts with increasingly desperate demands. She needed me to confirm her alibi for a Saturday when she'd told Mason she was visiting our grandmother. She wanted me to memorize details about a fabricated investment in case Mason's father asked questions. She needed me to convince our parents that certain credit card charges were wedding expenses, not personal shopping. Each request pushed me deeper into complicity. Refusing felt impossible, given family dynamics that had conditioned me to active deception rather than just observation. The stress affected my sleep, my appetite, my concentration. Chloe noticed. She confronted me one evening in our dorm room. What was happening? Why did I shrink every time my phone rang? What burden was I carrying? I told her everything, the favoritism, Olivia's financial manipulation, the demands for my participation in covering her tracks. Speaking the truth aloud to someone who believed me felt like releasing pressure from a valve sealed for 18 years. I played along, but documented everything. More screenshots joined my cloud folder. I recorded phone calls where she explicitly asked me to lie. Text messages outlining her schemes with shocking clarity. The folder grew thick with evidence, my patience dangerously thin. Chloe helped me plan contingency plans during late-night talks. She researched transfer options and financial aid alternatives while I focused on coursework. Her family stability had given her practical knowledge about navigating institutional systems that my privileged but dysfunctional upbringing never provided. Together, we mapped out scenarios. The NYU Alternative Program emerged from one of those research sessions. Chloe found it buried on the university's website, a modified track for students facing unexpected financial challenges. Reduced tuition, flexible scheduling, the same degree. I applied quietly, telling no one in my family, treating it as insurance. The acceptance arrived in early December. Another secret filed away. Christmas Eve arrived with the manufactured cheer Sarah excelled at creating. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. Lights twinkled, appetizers awaited guests. I'd been home for 3 days, counting the hours until I could escape back to campus. The party represented everything my parents valued: appearance over substance, performance over authenticity, social positioning over genuine connection. Guests arrived in expensive cars, wearing designer labels, carrying hostess gifts that screamed wealth. Sarah circulated with practiced grace. David worked the room with professional intensity. Olivia displayed her ring to anyone who showed interest. I stationed myself near the bar, nursing a sparkling cider, making small talk. My cousin, Sam, Aunt Diane's son, found me. He expressed surprise at how much I'd changed, how much more confident I seemed. The observation touched something tender, a reminder that personal growth was visible to people who cared. Mason's family arrived fashionably late. His mother, Evelyn, wore a statement necklace that probably cost more than my semester's textbooks. His father, Robert, radiated the smugness of inherited wealth, immediately engaging David in conversation about market trends. Mason gravitated toward Olivia, with the proprietary air of someone showing off a recent acquisition. The trouble started innocently enough. Evelyn, wearing pearls like armor, cornered me near the punch bowl, asking pointed questions about Olivia. She'd noticed inconsistencies in the investment story, unexplained purchases on credit card statements Mason thought were private, a pattern that didn't align with the sweet girl her son presented. Her questions were surgical, precise, the inquiries of someone who built a career detecting financial irregularities. She mentioned she'd worked in forensic accounting before retiring. Ice went through my veins. This woman could unravel schemes independently. She wasn't asking for information so much as testing whether I'd confirm her suspicions. The moment stretched like taffy as I calculated options. Deflecting might work short-term but raise more suspicions. Lying felt impossible under Evelyn's gaze. Telling the truth would detonate a bomb, reshaping my family dynamics permanently. 3 years of frustration, 18 years of suppressed resentment, months of being forced into complicity, all pressed against my teeth, demanding release. I should have deflected. Every survival instinct screamed at me to smile, redirect, protect the family narrative. Instead, something in me simply broke. I told Evelyn her instincts were correct. I didn't give specifics or evidence, just confirmation that the woman her son planned to marry was not who she appeared to be. Then I excused myself and walked away, heart pounding with a terrifying thrill of honesty. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Evelyn pulled Mason aside. Mason confronted Olivia. Olivia dissolved into theatrical tears, pointing her manicured finger directly at me. Within an hour, the Christmas Eve party had cleared out. I stood in David's study, facing a tribunal of parental fury. Sarah's face was blotchy red, physical embarrassment worse than any wrongdoing. David stood behind his desk like a judge. Olivia occupied the leather armchair, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Accusations came fast and sharp. I was jealous, sabotaging Olivia's future, always difficult, always resentful, tearing down the family. David declared I'd embarrassed him, potentially damaging a business relationship that took years to cultivate. I tried to defend myself, explaining the money she'd taken, the lies, the evidence. My words bounced off walls of parental denial. Olivia cried harder. Sarah accused me of fabricating stories to deflect from my own cruelty. The verdict came just before midnight. David announced my tuition payments would be suspended immediately until I provided a full and sincere apology to Olivia, to Mason, and to both sets of parents. Furthermore, I'd spend the rest of winter break writing apology letters to everyone who witnessed my disgraceful accusations. Only then would they consider continuing my education. The threat landed as he intended, a financial guillotine. Without their money, I'd withdraw from NYU, abandon my life, return home in defeat. David's expression suggested he'd checkmated me. Olivia watched with barely concealed triumph. She played the victim perfectly, crying on cue, denying everything, redirecting anger to me with lifelong skill. This was her arena. She expected me to crumble. Sarah stood slightly behind David, her expression harder to read. A flicker of maternal concern, quickly suppressed in favor of a united front. She'd spent 2 decades supporting David, breaking that pattern now would cost her more than supporting her younger daughter ever could. They expected tears, bargaining, desperate scrambling. What they got instead was a single word, delivered calmly, "All right." I turned, walked out of the study, up the stairs, and into my childhood bedroom. Behind me, I heard Sarah ask David if they'd been too harsh, if they should reconsider. David's response was confident and dismissive. I'd come around by morning, he assured her. I had no other choice. What David didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this exact scenario since I discovered Olivia's secrets. Not consciously planning, perhaps, but building the infrastructure of independence piece by piece for 18 months. A savings account, funded by my library job and summer earnings, held enough for 1 semester at a less expensive institution. More importantly, I'd researched transfer options, identifying NYU's lesser-known sibling program, reduced tuition for students completing degrees through online and in-person coursework. Chloe had suggested it, framed as responsible financial planning. She helped me open a bank account my parents couldn't monitor or freeze, routing deposits through it. We calculated exactly how much I'd need for various scenarios. The spreadsheet felt like a lifeline. My acceptance to the modified program had been in my email for 3 weeks, a backup I hoped never to activate. That night, I submitted my confirmation and paid the deposit with my own money. Then, I began packing with methodical efficiency, like someone who had mentally rehearsed this escape dozens of times. Dismantling my childhood bedroom took about 4 hours. I worked quietly, systematically, removing everything that mattered while leaving behind the generic furniture Sarah had selected. Clothes went into suitcases I'd stored in my closet. Books were sorted into boxes I'd hidden in the garage 2 days earlier, anticipating this. My laptop, containing years of evidence, was secured in my carry-on. By 6 a.m., my room was stripped. Clothes folded, books boxed. The laptop, containing my cloud access, wiped clean of any family photos. I'd arranged a rideshare to the train station, where a ticket to New York awaited, toward a future no longer dependent on Reed approval. Chloe had offered her family's guest room in Jersey City until student housing opened, a generosity that still moves me. Her parents, having relocated from California, welcomed the arrangement without hesitation, apparently accustomed to their daughter collecting strays needing temporary shelter. The knowledge of a warm bed waiting provided comfort in those dark early morning hours when doubt threatened to overwhelm determination. The confrontation came earlier than expected. I was carrying the last box downstairs when I encountered my entire family gathered in the living room, still in pajamas, clearly awakened by my departure preparations. The scene would have been comical under different circumstances. David stood with crossed arms, wearing plaid pajama pants and an NYU dad t-shirt he'd bought during move-in weekend, apparently forgetting its existence. Sarah clutched her robe, her hair mussed, makeup absent for the first time I could remember seeing her in front of other people. Olivia was on the couch, crying preemptively, tissue in hand. Sarah spoke first, her voice brittle. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing, where I imagined I could go, if I'd lost my mind. I sat down the box. Calmly, I explained I was leaving. My transfer was approved. My first semester paid. I had a place to stay with a friend until student housing opened. Everything was arranged, I'd be gone within the hour. The words landed like physical blows. Each sentence visibly impacted my parents' understanding of their position. David's negotiating leverage evaporated. His ultimatum, delivered with such confidence hours earlier, was meaningless, rendered so by preparations he never imagined his overlooked younger daughter capable of. I watched understanding dawn across their faces. The realization that I'd been planning this while they assumed I had no options. David's business mind calculated the implications: loss of control, narrative complications, the social embarrassment of a daughter publicly rejecting family support. Sarah seemed caught between concern and confusion, unable to reconcile the obedient child she thought she knew with the independent woman before her. The color drained from David's face as the implications sank in. He'd used the tuition threat as a negotiating tool, never believing I had alternatives. His leverage evaporating visibly rattled him. Olivia had been watching me, growing uneasy, her eyes tracking the boxes. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, strained. "Please tell me you didn't send it." The room went silent. Sarah looked between her daughters, confusion creasing her forehead. David's calculated expression shifted into something approaching genuine fear. "Send what?" he asked. I let the question hang, savoring the reversal of power dynamics that had governed my entire life. Then I explained. I had emailed Mason directly. I'd attached every piece of evidence gathered over the past 18 months, bank statements, text conversations, the spreadsheet tracking the taken money, recorded phone calls where Olivia detailed her manipulation strategies. The email had been scheduled to send automatically at midnight unless I canceled it. Given that I'd been occupied with family accusations and packing, cancellation had slipped my mind. By now, Mason had certainly reviewed the contents. Given the read talent for early rising, I suspected his family had seen everything as well. This wasn't entirely accurate. I'd sent the email manually around 2 a.m. after confirming my transfer and packing. The scheduled send story provided better dramatic framing. In truth, I had made a deliberate choice to expose Olivia's schemes. The evidence package took hours to compile. I organized documents chronologically, added explanatory notes, and included a cover letter expressing regret that Mason had been deceived. The presentation was professional, thorough, devastating. No reasonable person could review those materials and conclude anything other than systematic fraud. Sarah made a sound between a gasp and a moan. David frantically dialed his phone, presumably for damage control with Mason's family. Olivia just stared at me, her face cycling through shock, fury, and something that might have been grudging recognition. The call connected briefly before Robert Miller's voice, tight with controlled rage, delivered a succinct message: the engagement was terminated. Their family attorneys would be in contact regarding repayment of misappropriated funds. The business relationship between Miller Industries and Reed Accounting was under immediate review. The call ended with a decisive click that echoed through the silent living room. David's face was gray. Robert's words registered with devastating clarity. Miller Industries represented 30% of his firm's annual revenue. Losing that account would mean layoffs, restructuring, potentially even closure. His golden daughter's schemes hadn't just embarrassed the family, they'd threatened his entire professional legacy. I picked up my final box and walked toward the front door. My ride-share was 2 minutes away. The train departed in 45. NYU awaited, along with a life built on my own terms, not conditional family approval. David's voice stopped me at the threshold. He demanded I stay, that we discuss this rationally, that I understand the consequences of what I'd done. His tone had shifted from authoritative to almost pleading, a transition I'd never witnessed in 18 years. I turned back one last time. Consequences, I told him, are exactly what I understand. Olivia had taken $40,000 from a man who trusted her. She'd used me as a prop in her deceptions for months. When I tried to tell the truth, I was threatened with financial ruin, while she was cradled in parental protection. The consequences I'd triggered were simply the ones that should have occurred from the beginning. The car arrived as I finished speaking. I loaded my boxes, slid into the back seat, and directed the driver to the station. Through the rear window, I watched my family standing on the front porch in their pajamas, still processing the implosion of the reality they'd maintained for so long. The weeks that followed brought scattered updates from mutual acquaintances and distant relatives. Mason broke off the engagement immediately. His family demanded repayment. David's business relationship with Robert collapsed, costing them their biggest client. Olivia moved back home in disgrace, her social circle evaporating. My cousin, Sam, became an unexpected source of detailed information, texting regularly with updates on the fallout, seeming to take vicarious satisfaction in watching dynamics he'd observed finally implode. Through him, I learned my parents tried to spin the narrative as a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion by an ungrateful younger daughter. The Miller family attorneys quickly disabused them of that hope. Olivia's former friends distanced themselves as details leaked. Several reached out to me, admitting they'd suspected her deceptions and expressing relief someone finally held her accountable. The messages were validating, but also sad, confirmation her. Manipulative patterns were visible to observant outsiders, while my parents remained willfully blind. My parents tried contacting me several times in January. Calls went to voicemail. Emails unread. A letter arrived at my campus address, I returned it unopened. I had no interest in reconciliation that demanded I apologize for telling the truth. By February, I had a new rhythm. Classes demanded focus. Friends provided genuine support. The modified program suited my learning style, allowing me to work more hours while progressing toward my degree. Financial independence tasted like black coffee and ramen, but also like dignity and self-respect. Chloe's family hosted me for 3 weeks in Jersey City, treating me with overwhelming warmth. Her mother made enormous breakfasts, asked genuine questions. Her father offered financial advice with none of the transactional undertones of my own. Watching them interact provided a template for healthy dynamics, information I filed away. Returning to campus felt like coming home in a way my parents' house never had. My tiny dorm room, shared with a new roommate, became a sanctuary. That first night back, I cried for an hour, releasing tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. The tears weren't sad, exactly, more a physical expression of transition, grieving the family I'd wanted while accepting the family I actually had. My aunt, Diane, David's sister, who existed somewhat outside the family dynamics, reached out in March. She'd heard the entire story from multiple perspectives and supported my decision. More practically, she offered to co-sign a private student loan, easing financial pressure without parental strings. I accepted gratefully. Spring semester ended with honors. Summer brought an internship at a small consulting firm where my work ethic and analytical skills earned genuine praise. I rented a tiny studio apartment that required 3 locks but let me walk to work without relying on anyone. The internship opened doors I hadn't known existed. My supervisor, Michelle, who built her career despite her own family complications, recognized something familiar in my determination. She became a mentor beyond professional development, teaching me to navigate corporate dynamics, advocate for myself, build a reputation on competence. By summer's end, she offered me a part-time position covering most of my remaining expenses. My apartment, despite its size and questionable neighborhood, represented freedom in physical form. I decorated with thrift store finds and plants that somehow survived my irregular watering. Chloe visited, pronouncing the space tiny but perfect, helping me assemble a bookshelf that had defeated my solo efforts. The satisfaction of paying rent with my own money never grew old. The first anniversary of my Christmas Eve departure passed without fanfare. I treated myself to a nice dinner. Sitting alone by the window, watching holiday lights reflect, the solitude felt peaceful, a choice rather than a sentence. Olivia reached out about 18 months later. Her message was crafted to avoid direct apology while seeking reconnection through appeals to sisterly bonds and shared history. She mentioned therapy, understanding how her behavior affected others, hoping we might rebuild. I read her message 3 times. My reply was brief but honest. I wished her well in her growth, held no active anger, but wasn't prepared to pretend the past hadn't happened. Perhaps we could build something new someday, without old patterns, but it would develop slowly, on genuinely equal terms. She nodded as if she understood, though I suspected she hoped for a more dramatic reconciliation. We exchanged numbers but rarely used them. Occasional holiday texts confirmed we were both still alive and functioning, nothing more. My parents and I exist in polite estrangement. Birthday cards arrive. Christmas gifts are exchanged by mail. We've managed 2 brief, awkward phone conversations in 5 years. The relationship feels more like obligation than connection. But perhaps that's all some families can offer. I made peace with that long ago. The Christmas Eve confrontation taught me conditional love is no love at all. People who demand apologies for truth-telling don't deserve access to your honesty. I built my life on different foundations, ones that don't crumble when someone fails to perform according to script. Some stories end with grand reconciliation, tearful embraces, families made whole. This is not that story. This is the story of a girl who learned walking away can be the bravest thing you ever do, and that the family you choose often matters more than the family who raised you. I'm 31 now. I have a career I love, a partner who sees me clearly, friendships that have weathered real challenges and emerged stronger. My life is neither perfect nor particularly dramatic, but it is authentically mine. That Christmas Eve gift, wrapped in ultimatum and delivered with parental authority, turned out to be the greatest present I ever received. They meant to break me with their conditions. Instead, they set me free. What would you have done that Christmas Eve?